Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to episode RB. I am Matt McPeak. I am the host of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. On today's episode, we're going to break down the top 24 running backs in ADP, which is average draft position. Look at who should go higher, who should go lower. We'll check out the pass-catching running backs going in the middle round, some guys that can really give you some value, especially in PPR leagues. And then we'll take a quick look at handcuffing your running backs and why it's important, at least in terms of your top running backs. I'm a big fan of handcuffing, at least when you're talking about the top, 5 or 6 running backs in the league. So we'll get into that. But before we jump into the top 24, I want to talk about the zero RB strategy for this year. I play in a full PPR league, and for the past couple of years, I've been rocking with the zero RB strategy because I haven't had a top 5 pick in any of the years in that full PPR league. I've been having a lot of fun with it. I think I made it to the championship last year, and 2 years ago, I think I won that league. So it is definitely a viable strategy, but this year, I'm not sure that's the case. So usually, if my pick is at the end of the round, like 9th through 12th, if we're talking a 12-team league, I'll go with the zero RB strategy, which for those who aren't familiar, it's a strategy where you wait until the 6th round to take your first running back. The idea is to get yourself 3 of the top 30 wide receivers, 1 of the top 3 tight ends, and 1 of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks. To me, it only really makes sense if you're playing in a full PPR or if it's a 10-team half PPR. The concept is that with a top 3 tight end and a top 2 or 3 quarterback, you'll have a sizable advantage over almost all of your opponents in those 2 key positions. And with 3 really good wide receivers, you'll have an edge as far as catches go. And if you can hit on one of those mid-round running backs, you'll have a pretty stacked team. So this year, I don't think this strategy is really a good idea, and the reason is the depth at wide receiver. There are so many wide receivers you can get in the middle rounds that are that I think will be reliable players for you. I think the value is in those early round running backs this year. I think if there's ever a year to go running back with your first 2 picks, this is the year. So I mean, if it can still be done if, you play it right, if you can get, Mahomes or Lamar Jackson in the second round, you go for the top wide receiver available in the first round, which means you'll probably end up with Devontae Adams or maybe Michael Thomas if he falls. And then, if you can get a quarterback and a tight end with your second and third round picks, I've seen it. I've done a mock where you can get Lamar at the end of the second and then get Mark Andrews in the beginning of the third. And then in the fourth and fifth, you get another set of wide receivers. And after the first 5 picks, you have one of the 2 best quarterbacks, one of the 3 or 4 best tight ends, and you have 3 wide receivers that you can count on as far as receptions go throughout the season. So I think it's a viable option, but this year I am going to stay away from it unless in that full PPR league, which is a 12-team league that I'm in, unless I have like the 11th or 12th pick, then I think I'm going to have to stay away from the zero RB strategy this year. But it has been fun over the past couple of years. pretty much if you can hit on one of those middle round running backs, you're pretty much set for the year. You're pretty much a shoo-in for the playoffs, and then you just got to hope things work out in the playoffs. So let's get into this. The Fantasy Pros ADP half PPR. This is as of Monday, August 17th. I went with half PPR because I prefer half over full. I'm the commissioner of 2 normal leagues. I'm also the commissioner of an all IDP league, which is a lot of fun. If you guys don't play any IDP out there, you should give it a shot. But both of the leagues that I'm the commissioner of is half PPR. I feel like with full PPR, it kind of it makes those top-end wide receivers just so incredibly valuable. It kind of devalues running backs. And for a position that's already, by week 6 or 7, you're already looking at a pretty thin position, that being the running back position. So I prefer half PPR, and that's why I went with the half PPR Fantasy Pros. And for those who don't know, Fantasy Pros is an awesome website. They go out and they take the ADP of Yahoo, of NFL Network, of CBS, ESPN, pretty much all the top dogs as far as fantasy football apps go, and they average out each player's draft position for all of the sites combined. I think it's a really good indicator as far as where players go, where you can expect to get players. So if you're, doing your prep for the season, I think Fantasy Pros is a great website to go to kind of get an idea of what players should generally be available for you at each one of your picks. So to start off, we got Christian McCaffrey obviously going number 1. Then we got Saquon, Zeke Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. All are going 1 and 4 as they should. No surprise. I think for me, I would take Zeke last out of this group because of the addition to CeeDee Lamb and the departure of their head coach, Jason Garrett. I think the Cowboys might throw the ball just a little bit more than they did last year, and I think Zeke sees just a tad bit less work than the other 3 guys. So all 4 of them obviously deserve to be the top 4 running backs, and I think they should be the first 4 picks in half PPR leagues. I wouldn't go with Michael Thomas over any of these 4 guys. Maybe in a full PPR you can go with Michael Thomas as the 3rd or 4th pick, but you can't go wrong with any of these 4 running backs. You shouldn't be upset if you have the 4th pick and you have to take your pick, the runt of the litter, if you will, from these 4 guys. The rest of the first-round running backs in order, we got Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, and Nick Chubb. I think the order should be Mixon, Chubb, Cook, Henry. I think Mixon is going to have a breakout season with all that talent at wide receiver in Cincinnati, with a beefed-up offensive line and a new first overall draft pick quarterback. I like Chubb because of the attention that the pair of wide receivers draw in Cleveland, and the new coach is going to run the football. But I think Kareem Hunt takes away too much of that passing down work from Nick Chubb, and I think Austin Hooper takes one too many red zone touches from Chubb. Dalvin Cook showed us last year what he can do in a full season, but him threatening to hold out and the presence of Alexander Mattison, who also showed us a lot last year, makes me leery of taking Dalvin Cook. I had him in a non-PPR league last year, or actually over the past 2 years. I decided to keep him, and he's definitely one of the more frustrating players for sure. If he falls to the 2nd round, I'd consider it, but I can't risk losing my first overall pick because of a holdout. So, next we got Derrick Henry. Has had so many touches over the last 2 years. I think it's inevitable that his touches go down. Plus, the Titans drafted Darrington Evans in the 3rd round, and I think he's going to get more work than a lot of these fantasy experts out there are predicting for him. So, again, I think that order of the 4th through 8th running backs should be Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry. All right, the 2nd round running backs as of right now. We got Kenyon Drake, who is kind of a wild card for me, but I'm willing to take him as the first running back in the 2nd round, where he's being drafted right now. We saw him catch a lot of balls last year, and he had one hell of a fantasy playoff run. He's another guy that should benefit from all the talent at wide receiver, with DeAndre Hopkins joining the team and Larry Fitzgerald still being there and Christian Kirk in line to be one of those third-year wide receiver breakouts. Josh Jacobs is going next. Again, is a dude with a whole lot of new talent at wide receiver. He showed a lot of toughness last year as a rookie playing through a shoulder injury. I think he ends up getting more work this year than he did last year, although Gruden has this reputation as a quarterback guy who loves drawing up these plays with these long-ass names. He still loves to pound that rock, and I think Jacobs does a little more of that this year with a lot of lighter boxes, with the team with defenses needing to respect all the speed that the Raiders now have on the outside between Henry Ruggs, Lynn Bowden, Brian Edwards, and then you still got Darren Waller up the middle, who is one of the more athletic tight ends in the league. Next, you got Aaron Jones, who is currently going as the number 11 running back, number 19 overall, and I honestly have no idea how to evaluate that pick. On one hand, the Packers did run the ball more in 2019 than they had in the 5 years previous, but on the other hand, Aaron Jones was tied with Christian McCaffrey for most total touchdowns among running backs last year with 19. I think Aaron Jones benefited a lot from the absence of Devontae Adams. All three of Aaron Jones's receiving touchdowns came when Adams was out of the lineup. And also, the Packers just drafted A.J. Dillon in the second round. He is going to get carries, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the large majority of the goal line carries. So I'm going to let somebody else draft Aaron Jones, and I'm going to take one of the next guys that I'm about to talk about. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He is in the best position of all the rookies this year by far. With Damian Williams opting out this year because of COVID, Helaire should see a ton of work. I think the Chiefs decided to go running back in the first round because they aren't sold on Darwin Thompson, the rookie from last year. I don't think Darrell Williams gets any more than 60, 65 touches, which is what he got last year. And I think the signing of DeAndre Washington is strictly a depth signing. I don't think he's going to threaten Clyde's upside at all. Andy Reid has said he thinks this dude could be as good as Brian Westbrook, maybe even better, which is a huge statement for how versatile Westbrook was. I honestly can't believe Clyde is going at the end of the second round. In PPR leagues, I would take him ahead of Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones because I think he's going to catch at least 30 balls, which is what Damian Williams caught last year. I think Clyde could catch closer to 50 passes this year. Next is Austin Eckler. He's going as RB13, and I don't like this spot at all. Eckler busted out last year in the absence of Melvin Gordon, and he played great throughout the year, but the quarterback situation in LA this year worries me. I don't like Tyrod Taylor for any of the Chargers fantasy players besides maybe Hunter Henry. Austin Eckler's value is really dependent on his role in the passing game, and with Tyrod at the helm, I don't think Eckler sees any more or anywhere near the amount of targets he did last year. He had over 100 targets last year. Usually having a quarterback that is mobile can help running backs in the running game, but I just don't like Eckler as the number 13 running back. I'd rather have this next guy that I'm about to bring up, who is Miles Sanders, who is primed and ready for a productive sophomore year. From week 10 on, he was the number 12 running back. He caught 50 passes last year, mainly because of how depleted the Eagles' wide receiving core was. If you remember, they were down without Deshaun Jackson. They were without. His name is escaping me now. Hot damn. Big guy. Whatever. The Eagles' wide receivers were really beat up last year. But for a rookie to show that he can handle that kind of workload and be productive and impressive, he's an offensive guy. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to catch balls and run both in between the tackles and on the edges. And apparently, at some point last week, Doug Peterson said that it is Miles Sanders' job from the get-go. He will be the starting running back. He will get the majority of the touches. So that is good to hear. In the third round, we got Todd Gurley, who is going number 15 right now, and I think that makes sense in PPR leagues, but in non-PPRs, I would wait a little longer on Gurley. I think he's going to be a lot more involved in the passing game than he was in his last year in Los Angeles. I think the Falcons coaching staff will manage his touches enough to keep him active throughout the year, and the team is so talented around him. He won't have to carry the same workload that he did with the Rams. There won't be as much attention on him as there was with the Rams. I think the receiving cores are probably pretty even. Maybe the edge goes to Atlanta's receiving core, but the quarterback situation by far goes to the Falcons. So I think Todd Gurley is going to see a lot less guys in the box this year than he did in all of his years with the Rams. He may get a bit fewer carries than we'd want, but I think he's going to be just as active in the passing game. So I think Todd Gurley in the third round, number 15 RB is not too bad. Melvin Gordon is another guy that I would wait a little longer on. He's going at the end of the 5th round right now, and he's on a team that will focus on running the ball, at least in the early downs, but he has 2 other backs to split the touches with, Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. I think the Broncos are going to throw the ball a little bit more this year than they did last year with all those wide receivers that they drafted. Gordon has always been somewhat of a touchdown-dependent guy in his years with the Chargers, and if I'm picking at the end of the 4th, I think I'd rather have this next guy, Leonard Fournette. Did not have his 5th-year option picked up by the Jaguars, which tells me he's going to get a lot of work this year, unless the Jags intend to re-sign him, which I really don't think they do. There's no reason why the Jaguars shouldn't just completely run him into the ground. The dude had over 1,600 total yards last year, exactly 100 targets while still getting 265 carries. Fournette as the 18th running back, number 37 overall. I'm all for it. I think he easily finishes inside his ADP. I think he could be one of the steals of the draft this year if he gets the amount of work that I think he's going to get. Next is Chris Carson. Carson is a beast, and I love watching him play. He benefits from having a mobile quarterback with Russell Wilson, and his biggest competition in touches, Rashad Penny, is going to start the season on the PUP list as of right now, I believe. However, he's coming off a late season injury as well, and I've mentioned it a lot on this podcast. Russell Wilson has voiced his want to throw the ball more in 2020. They have DK Metcalf coming off of a great rookie season, and I think DK poses a real threat to a handful of goal line touches that have gone to Chris Carson in the past. I think rather than give it to one of these running backs that may not be completely healthy, I think maybe they just throw a jump ball up to DK Metcalf. With that being said, I'm still willing to take Chris Carson at the end of the 3rd round. I might prefer to wait until the 4th, but I think he's still a good pick there at the end of the 3rd. Correction, when I was talking about Melvin Gordon, I mentioned him going in the 5th round. He's going in the 3rd round. Sorry about that. To start on the 4th round running backs, we got the second rookie behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We got Jonathan Taylor going in the 4th round. Another rookie that is stepping into a great situation. He'll be running behind one of the best offensive lines in football. The Colts want to run the ball, and now with Rivers at quarterback and another talented rookie at wide receiver to go with T.Y. Hilton and a 3rd-year wide receiver breakout candidate in Zach Pascal on the outside. They got a pair of good tight ends in Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. Yes, he has some competition for carries with Marlon Mack, and Nyheim Hines will get the lion's share of the running back targets, but Jonathan Taylor is definitely the most talented running back on the Colts. He might not get off to a great start, but I think he's a guy that if you get into the playoffs, you're gonna be really happy that you drafted him, because I can see him being a league winner towards the end of the season. The next guy is James Conner. He's showed us that he can be a top 10 running back like he was in 2018 when he finished 6th in half PPR. He stepped in for the guy we're going to discuss next, and he was great. But he is one of the most injury-prone guys going past the third round. He's had shoulder issues, ankle problems, hamstrings. Plus, he's got a whole crew of guys behind him that have shown that they can also be productive with touches. We saw Benny Snell have a handful of good games with Connor out last year. Jalen Samuels caught a ton of passes last year. They also have a rookie in the mix that the team is pretty high on. I'm nervous about Big Ben. There's just a lot of concerns in Pittsburgh, so I'm going to let Connor fall to somebody else. The next guy is Le'Veon Bell. Will be an absolute steal in PPR leagues if you can get him in the fourth round. The Jets have invested a lot this offseason in the offensive line, and if Darnold stays healthy, I think Le'Veon will catch 60 to 70 balls, no problem. He caught 66 last year in only 15 games, and that was with two schlubs at quarterback during the games that Darnold missed with mono. He doesn't really have anyone to threaten his carries, and he will be the focal point down in the red zone. I think Bell is one of the most undervalued players right now in fantasy. I don't think I don't like him in the fourth in non-PPR leagues. If it's a standard league, I don't like him in the fourth. But if you're getting points for catches, Le'Veon should at least be a top RB2. The next guy is Mark Ingram, was drafted 46th overall last year, and he is going 46th overall this year. This is another guy that's it's another pick that's pretty surprising to me. I would much rather have Ingram than James Conner. That's just me. I get it. In PPR leagues, Ingram loses some value, but he still caught 25 balls in only 15 games, and 5 of his touchdowns came through the passing game. So he is a lot more valuable in non-PPR leagues. But the Ravens just crank out rushing yards. They broke the record for the most team rushing yards last year, with a little over 1,000 of them belonging to Mark Ingram. He's another guy that I'd be thrilled to have as my number 2 running back. Next is David Johnson. He's had one of the most up and down careers of all the active running backs. He's going 53rd overall right now, 23rd running back off the board. He finished 9th in 2015. He was 1st in 2016 with over 2,000 total yards. Then in 2017, he only played in one game, missed the rest of the season with an ankle injury, and he just hasn't really been the same since. In 2018, he finished 10th, and then he was 38th last year. He was traded to the Texans in the DeAndre Hopkins deal. I think he will be involved in the passing game, but the problem is his teammate, Duke Johnson, was brought there to do exactly that. So I have no clue how this RB situation is going to work. I don't think he's going to see any more than 8 to 10 carries a game max. I see him as a poor man's Todd Gurley because, like Gurley, David Johnson's value is very dependent on what he does with his targets. And last but not least, Devin Singletary. He was the 3rd best rookie running back last year behind Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders. He finished as the number 31 running back in half PPR. He had the immortal Frank Gore kind of holding him back last year. Gore averaged about 10 carries a game last year. This year, the vulture for Singletary is the rookie running back from Utah, Zach Moss. Moss is a bigger, stockier guy. The two of them together are a pretty solid 1-2 punch. The problem for me is, as much as I like Singletary, I don't think he's going to get a lot of goal line carries, if any at all, with Moss there and Josh Allen taking so many of those short yardage run plays himself. Last year, there were only 5 teams that targeted their running backs less than the Bills. That's the Texans, the Ravens, the Titans, Rams, and Raiders. And I don't expect that to change this year with the addition of Stephon Diggs. Singletary is going as the number 24 running back right now, and that's the end of the 5th round. If I can get him as my flex in a non-PPR league, I'd be okay with taking him there, but in PPR leagues, I'd rather have Kareem Hunt, who is going about 5 spots later. So That is the top 24 running backs in half PPR according to the Fantasy Pros ADP. That should give you a better idea of how the draft should go as far as when these guys are drafted and relatively in what order. So now I want to check out some of the running backs going in the 6th round or later that have some serious upside as far as pass catching goes. Every team has one of those scat backs, a guy that will get the majority of his touches in the passing game, and every year these guys serve as either great bye week replacements or guys that we run to the waiver wire for once we get into the meat of the season. So why not just draft these guys in the back half of the draft? I'm all for drafting guys with the most upside that have good shots at becoming the workhorse, but guys that could fill in for a back that has lost their job or some of these pass catchers can easily finish as in the top 30 and could be solid flex options for you throughout the year. So the first one for me, I kind of mentioned him earlier, is Kareem Hunt. He's not going to get enough touches to make him a must-start RB1 or 2 throughout the year, but I think he can get enough targets to go with the handful of carries he'll get to make him a solid flex play throughout the year. Plus, if something were to happen to Nick Chubb, Hunt would be a must-play RB1 without a doubt. Next is James White. I know Tom Brady is gone, but James White has been one of the best running backs in the league for years now. With Cam there, I think White will see a slight downtick in total targets, but Cam has showed his ability to throw the ball to his running backs. From 2013 to 2018, the Panther running backs have had the 4th or 5th most team targets among running backs. So Cam has always been good at targeting those running backs. And yes, James White is not Christian McCaffrey, but he's pretty damn good in the passing game himself. Next, Tariq Cohen. Cohen was one of only 4 running backs last year to have over 100 targets. In the past 3 seasons, Cohen has been either 2nd or 3rd on the team in targets. So he's used a lot in the passing game. I don't expect that to change this year. In PPR leagues, Cohen is a great get at 118 overall. Jesus. Next is Duke Johnson. Duke finished as the number 18 running back in 2017 with his 74 catches. He's got 62 targets each of the last 2 years since that big year in 2017. With DeAndre Hopkins now in Arizona, his 150 targets are up for grab, and if Duke can get a good piece of that target share, he could have another big year in the passing game. Next is another rookie, Antonio Gibson. The Washington football team's new head coach, Ron Rivera, has said this offseason that Gibson reminds him of Christian McCaffrey, which is obviously extremely high praise. Gibson is a converted wide receiver, was somewhat of a scat back slot receiver in college, but with so many running backs in Washington, it's tough to see Gibson getting any more than 3 to 5 carries at most per game. He would have to be super efficient with whatever targets he does end up getting in his rookie year, and for him to be a legit fantasy option. So I'd stay away from drafting him in non-PPR leagues, but in full PPR leagues, if I can get him after pick 100, I don't think it's the worst pick in the world. Next is Nyheim Hines. Last year, Hines finished with the 4th most targets on the team, and that was with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Now with Phillip Rivers at quarterback, I think he sees even more than that, especially if T.Y. Hilton is unable to stay healthy from his days with LT, Danny Woodhead, and more recently with Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Rivers has no problem checking down to his running backs and just letting him pick up easy yards. Another guy, LaShawn McCoy, recently signed by the Bucs to give them some more depth with the rookie Keyshawn Vaughn contracting COVID. As I mentioned earlier, Tom Brady loves throwing to his running backs, and I think McCoy is in his later years. He can still catch the ball and pick up, whatever the defense gives him. Another guy, another rookie, Darrington Evans, the rookie brought in by the Titans to spell Derrick Henry, certainly has that role of the pass-catching running back locked down. Deion Lewis left for the Giants, and with the money that Tennessee gave Henry this offseason, I think they will try to limit his touches throughout the year to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So I think throwing the ball to Evans will be a surprisingly significant chunk of the Titans offense in 2020. Next, we got Lynn Bowden is another one of these super versatile players, another rookie like Antonio Gibson. Bowden played a lot of snaps in college as the slot receiver and played a decent amount of split out wide as well. So I think the overwhelming majority of Bowden's touches will come in the passing game, but if he's tagged as a running back, he could be a great late-round target for anyone that does decide to go zero RB strategy this year. And last but not least, we got Chris Thompson. I mentioned earlier how I think Fournette will be run into the ground with the Jags this year and how he had 100 targets last year. I think one way the Jags can keep him fresh is to target him less and shift some of those targets over to Chris Thompson, who has shown us in the past that he can catch the ball and make plays. Two honorable mentions: Daria Gumbawali led the Bucs in targets last year, and Jalen Samuels had a bunch of really good games as far as catching the ball. Quickly, one more thing. Another big thing to me with top running backs is handcuffing. I don't believe you should handcuff every single running back you have, but your top running back, I do believe, should be handcuffed. Reason one is that you can afford to essentially waste a roster spot on your top running back's handcuff because you're going to be starting that top running back every single week anyway, so you don't really need the depth as much. And reason number two is pretty much every year we see weeks where the top dog goes down and his backup just goes off. Last year, Latavius Murray in weeks 7 and 8 with Alvin Kamara out, he had 300 total yards and 4 touchdowns in those 2 games. I know it was week 17 and it didn't really matter, but Mike Boone had 25 fantasy points while Dalvin Cook sat out to get ready for the playoffs. And then DeAndre Washington had 19 fantasy points in week 14, stepping in for the injured Josh Jacobs. So handcuffing is a very good strategy if you are picking one of those top running backs. I think it's a good idea, and I always do it when I have one of those top running backs. So that's going to do it for the RB episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check us out next week. We're going to be finishing up these position episodes, talking about wide receivers next week. So as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.